Okay, so good morning to everyone. So let us begin today's lecture. In the last lecture, we covered the algorithm, right? So for minimizing the number of states in a DFA, right? So we wanted to ask this question, right? Or what rather we wanted to answer this question that given a language, right? Given a regular language, what is the minimal DFA, or what is the smallest DFA that accepts that language? So this question is of practical relevance, right? Because right, so in practice, right, you would given a regular language, right, you can only implement a deterministic finite automaton, right? And therefore, the number of states in this DFA, right, is basically going to determine the complexity uh, of recognizing a string of this language, right? So it will basically determine how many steps it will take in order to accept a given string of the language. Right? So you want to minimize the complexity. Right? You want to minimize the time taken to accept a string of the language, and that's why you want to minimize the number of states in the DFA, right, for that language. So towards that end, we basically formulated this algorithm uh, for finding out the minimal DFA, right? So this algorithm basically takes a given DFA, right, of the language. It takes any arbitrary DFA of the language, and then it collapses states together. So this collapsing relation, right, or this collapsing operation is based upon this equivalence relation between states. So you say that two states P and Q are equivalent if and only if there is no distinguishing string, right, between those two states, which means that every string for all strings, right, X, right. So if the string X takes the state P to a final state, then it should also take it should also so rather it should also take the state Q to a final state. So so in that case, you can collapse P and Q together. P and Q would be equivalent, and therefore you can get a DFA with a smaller number of states. Right? So you keep on collapsing states together until you cannot collapse anymore. So until you have collapsed all the equivalent states, and we showed that this resulting DFA also accepts the same language as the original DFA. So there was this other question, right? That okay, so here in this particular algorithm, you are starting with some DFA of the language, right? And then you are collapsing states of this DFA in order to get the minimal DFA. But what happens if, or what if there is another arbitrary DFA, right? Uh, which could potentially have lower number of states, right? So in order to answer that question, right, we need to do a bit of theory, right? So we need to understand this concept of Myhill-Narod relations. Okay? So just to briefly recap, right, what are these Myhill-Narod relations? So the main goal, right, or the main motivation behind introducing these relations, right, is that we want to show that if you're given this regular language R, right, and if there are two DFAs M and N, which accept the same language R, then this collapsed DFAs, right, which is this M minus this equivalence relation, right, and N minus equivalence relation. So this collapsed DFAs that are obtained from M and N are both isomorphic, which means that they have the same number of states, and in fact they are both in some ways equivalent to each other. Uh, so if we can show this, right, if we can show this, then we can answer that question, right, that no, there cannot be another arbitrary DFA with lower number of states, because if there was, right, then basically, so if you're given some other DFA which accepts the same language, I perform the collapsing operation, right, with the collapsing algorithm on that particular DFA, and then according to this theorem, right, according to this result, I would get the same number of states. So therefore, it's enough to just perform the collapsing algorithm, or to run the collapsing algorithm on some arbitrary DFA of the language. Okay, so that's the motivation. So this is the final result that we want to put. Right? So in order to do that, right, we need to first define what are this isomorphic DFAs, right? So if you're given two DFAs M and N, we say that they are isomorphic if there exists this one-to-one and onto function f, right, from the state space of M to the state space of N. So from Q1 to Q2, there is this one-to-one and onto function f, right, such that this f relates the start states of the two DFAs, right? And it also relates every transition of the two DFAs, right? So here I have also sort of diagrammatically shown, right, how this f function relates the transitions of the two DFAs, right? So if you start with if you start with some state q1, right, in the DFA n m, right, and you perform the transition on the symbol a, right, and you reach the state q2, then if this q1 is related by the function f to q1 prime, then in the DFA n, right? So this is in the DFA m, and this is in the DFA n. Right? So so in the DFA n, if you consider the transition on q1 prime and the symbol a, then you will also go to q2 prime, which will also be related by the function f to q2. So that's what this number 3 is saying. Right? So it's saying that f of delta 1 of q comma a, right, is the same as delta 2 of f of q comma a. So delta 1 of q comma a is the transition that you make in the DFA m. Right? So once you make the transition in the DFA m, and then you go through f to the other DFA, then it's the same as if you first made that if you first went to the DFA n, right? So if you first applied f of q, and then you made the transition in the DFA n. And finally, we also say that the final states are also related to each other by the function f. Right? So we say that q belongs to f1 if and only if f of q belongs to f2. So essentially, right, if you were to draw the DFAs, rather if you were to consider the graphical representation, right, of these two DFAs m and n, then they would be the same graphs. Right? Just the labeling of the vertices would be different. So that's the definition of isomorphic DFAs. Right? So okay, so then we went into defining what is a Mahail-Nerud relation. Right? So we said that okay, if you have a regular language R, right, and if you consider a DFA M, which accepts that language, so L of M is equal to R, right, then we define this relation, right, on the strings of sigma star, right? So this relation, right, is defined on sigma star cross sigma star, right? So it relates any two arbitrary strings in sigma star. Okay? So it need not just relate strings which are in R or not in R and so on. Right? So it relates any two arbitrary strings in sigma star, right? And we say that this relation, right, is sort of induced by the DFA M, right? So that's why we have the subscript M there. And we say that two strings x and y are related by this relation if and only if delta hat s of x is equal to delta hat of s of y. So which means that two strings are related if you process the DFA, right, beginning from the start state using both of those strings, you will reach the same state. So if you begin from s, right, and if you process x and you process y, and then you will reach the same state q. So all such strings would be equivalent to each other. Okay. So you can see that this relation is reflexive, symmetric, and transitive, and therefore it's actually an equivalence relation as well. But apart from the fact that it's equivalence relation, this particular relation also satisfies three other properties. Okay? So let's just quickly revise what are those properties. Right? So the first property is that it's right congruence, which means that if x and y are related to each other by this relation, then for every symbol a, xa and ya are also related to each other. The second property is that it defines R, which means that if x and y are related to each other, then x belongs to R if and only if y belongs to R. Okay, so we will actually formally define this notion of refinement in today's lecture as well, but this is the definition. And finally, the third property that this relation has is that it has finite index, which means that it is a finite number of equivalence classes. So in fact, the number of equivalence classes of this relation is the same as the number of states in the original DFA M. So so what did we do, right? So we started with a regular language and its DFA, and then we obtained this relation that's induced by this DFA, right? And we said that this relation has a bunch of properties. So see, it's an equivalence relation, it's right congruence, it defines R, and it has finite index. Okay, so that's what we have done so far. Okay. So any questions so far? Okay, so then let's move forward now. Okay. So given that we have actually defined this relation, right, so let me actually go to a new node now. Okay, so given that we have defined this relation, right, let's actually generalize from this, right? So this is generally what you do in maths, right? So you come up with some particular instance, right, which has some properties, and then you generalize from that particular instance, right? So for example, if you start with say set of natural numbers or set of integers, right? And you see that okay, this set of natural numbers or set of integers obey certain properties, right, with respect to binary functions like addition, multiplication, and so on, right? And then you generalize from that, right? So then you take, okay, if you have some arbitrary set and some arbitrary operations which satisfy this property, then it will be called a field, right, or a group or a vector space and so on. So that's exactly what we're going to do, right? So we are going to generalize from this relation, right? So we are going to say that okay, uh, suppose you have some language R, which is a subset of sigma star. Yeah, so we don't even say that this is a regular language. We just say that okay, there is some language R which belongs to sigma star. Okay? And we say that suppose there is this relation, right, on sigma star. So this is a relation on the strings present in sigma star, such that this relation satisfies all the properties, right, that we just saw. Right? So it's basically an equivalence relation. Right? It satisfies right congruence. It refines R, and it has finite index. Okay. So then, right, we say that this particular relation is then a Mahel-Néron relation, right, for the language R. Okay. So remember that we in the last lecture, right, we basically derived this relation from a DFA, right? But in this instance, right, we are not even assuming that R is a regular language. Therefore, we are not even considering any DFAs, right? So we are just saying that okay, this is some arbitrary relation on sigma star cross sigma star such that it satisfies these four properties. Okay? So then this relation is called a Mahel-Néron relation for R. Okay? And then from this relation, you can basically do the reverse operation, right? So you can actually obtain the DFA, right? Obtain a DFA which actually recognizes the language R. So you can get a DFA whose language is going to be exactly R. And how do we do that? So that's very straightforward. Okay. So let's construct a DFA from this particular relation. Right? So we'll denote this DFA by this symbol. And so this DFA is going to have some set of states, some transition function, some start state, and some set of final states. Okay. So what should be the state space of this DFA? Right. So we want to say that this language of this DFA must be the set R, and we want to define this DFA based on the on this particular equivalence relation. So what should be the state space of this DFA? Any suggestions? Okay. So Aaron is saying set of equivalence classes. Yeah. So remember that we have this property 4, right? Which says that this relation has finite index. So which means that it has a finite number of equivalence classes. So I can take the set of equivalence classes of this relation as the state space of this DFA. Right? So this is the equivalence classes of X, is that X belongs to sigma star, the set of equivalence classes. So we know that this set is finite. So therefore we are safe. Uh, okay, so let's now define the transition function. So the transition function delta prime is now going to take an equivalence class, and it's going to take some symbol. Okay, and then what should be the new equivalence class that it goes to? So it should go to some other state of the DFA. So we will define this as the equivalence class of XA. The start state S prime will be the equivalence class of the empty string. And the set of final states F prime will be the equivalence class of all strings such that X belongs to R. So let's first make sure that this is well defined, right? So this obeys the constraints of a DFA, right? So we saw that Q prime is a finite set of states, so that is fine. Okay. But what about this delta prime, right? So this delta prime must be a function. Okay. So given some equivalence class, right, of X that we start from, if I apply this operation, then I must always go to the same equivalence class. So how is that satisfied? Right? Uh, so you can take two strings X and Y, right, and they may both be in the same equivalence class. Okay? In which case you would get, if you were to apply this delta prime, right, you will get you would get XA and YA. Right? So if you have the equivalence class of X being equal to the equivalence class of Y, right, then delta prime of this X comma A will be equal to XA, and delta prime of Y comma A will be equal to Y. So then how do we ensure that these two are the same? Yeah, so right congruence. That's correct. Right? So remember that we also assume this property number 2, right, which says that this relation is a right congruence. So the right congruence property says that if X and Y are related, then XA and YA are also related. So this ensures that that this particular delta prime is actually well defined. Okay. And finally, let's look at the set of final states as well. Right? So we said that F prime is going to be the set of all equivalence classes of strings which are present in R. Okay. So we say that X belongs to R, and only if X belongs to F prime. So here, right, the left hand side is very clear, right, going from left to right, which is that if X belongs to R, then obviously its equivalence class is going to be in F prime, right? But how do we prove the other direction, right? Which is that if the equivalence class of some string is in F prime, yeah, refinement gives that. That's correct, right? So let's say that some X, right, belongs to F prime. So that would imply that that there exists some string Y, right, such that X is related to Y and Y belongs to R. But that would mean that X also belongs to R, okay? And that in turn would mean that yeah, that's what we're trying to show. So because of the fact that it's a refinement of R. Okay. So we have seen that this is so this is a well-defined DFA, okay, and now we want to show that its language is the same as R. So in order to do that, we will prove this lemma. So let's call this as lemma 1. So this lemma says that this delta prime hat of some X comma Y is going to be XY, right? So delta prime hat of the state of the equivalence class of X and processing the string Y on that is the same as the equivalence class of the string XY. Okay. So the proof here is very straightforward, right? So let's quickly do this, right? So let's consider the base cases. We'll do this by induction on the size of Y. Okay. So first we consider Y to be equal to epsilon. So in this case, delta prime hat of this X comma epsilon is the same as X, right? By the definition of delta hat, which is the same as X epsilon. And then let's consider the inductive case. So let's say that we consider Y to be equal to WA. So now delta prime hat of X comma WA. So here you apply the definition of delta hat at the extended transition function. So this would be the same as delta prime applied over delta prime hat of X W comma A. And here we use the inductive hypothesis, right? So the inductive hypothesis says that this is the same as XW, comma A, And then we use the definition of delta prime. So which is this, which says that this is the same as XWA. And this is what we wanted to show, right? That delta delta prime hat of XWA is the same as the equivalence class of XWA. Okay. And now, right, we can show the theorem. Let's call this as theorem 1. It's just that the language of this this DFA that we have constructed is the same as R. So let's say that X belongs to the language of this DFA. So then what can we say about this particular X? So we can say that delta prime hat of the start state and X is going to belong to the final state, which is F prime. And then I can use lemma 1. So lemma 1 would say that this is the same as the equivalence class of X belonging to F prime. And this means that we've just shown that if X belongs, if the equivalence class belongs to F prime, then X belongs to R, right? Which is this result. Yeah. So yeah, so this means that this particular DFA that we have constructed actually recognizes the language R itself. Okay. So the point behind constructing this DFA, right, is that we can, instead of reasoning about DFAs, we can now reason purely in terms of this equivalence relations, right? This Myhill-Nédot relations. Okay. So in fact, so in order to actually gain some more practice, right, with isomorphic DFAs, right, and the nature of this Myhill-Nédot relations, let's also show So okay, so we have seen that given a DFA, right, I can construct this Myhill-Nédot relation from that DFA, and similarly, given a Myhill-Nédot relation, I can also construct a DFA. Right? So I can do these two operations, right, one after the other. Right? So in other words, let's say that I start with some Myhill-Nédot relation, okay? And from this I construct this DFA. Okay? And then from this DFA, I again I construct its Myhill-Nédot relation. So remember that this relation is constructed from this DFA. So it would say that two strings are related if and only if they take the start state to the same state of this DFA. Right? So you can show that these two relations, right, are basically the same. Okay, so that's what so that's what we are going to show. Okay? So we are going to show that if you begin with some arbitrary Myhill-Nédot relation, you construct its DFA, and then you construct the relation that is induced by this particular by this particular DFA, right? Then it would be a Myhill-Nédot relation. And in fact, it would be the same as the original relation that you started with. Okay. So let's do this. So let's say that so let's say you are given some two strings X and Y which belong to sigma star, which are related by this relation. So remember that how we define this relation, right? So we said that so X is related to Y by this relation if and only if delta hat of delta prime hat of epsilon comma X is equal to delta prime hat of epsilon comma Y. So okay, and based on this, we will show that X and Y are in fact related by the original Myhill-Nédot relation as well. Okay. So how should I proceed forward? Any suggestions? So consider this lemma, right, that we showed about delta prime hat. Yeah. So we can use the lemma, right? So we can so this would then be the same as sorry. So this would then say that the equivalence class of X, right, is basically equal to the equivalence class of Y. And this basically means that so this equivalence class is according to the original relation, right? The original this relation. Okay. So that's why this would mean that X is related to Y. Yeah. So that's it, right? So that basically proves this theorem that that if you begin from some arbitrary Mayer-Hildenburg relation and you construct its DFA, and then you construct the equivalence relation, the Mayer-Hildenburg relation that is induced by this DFA, you will get back the original MN relation. And similarly, you can do this procedure right, the other way around as well, which means that let's say that you begin from some arbitrary DFA M. And from this DFA, you construct its Mayer-Hildenburg relation. And then you construct the DFA from this particular MN relation. So then you can show that these two are going to be the same. Right? But here when we say same, right, we mean that they will be isomorphic to each other. So these two DFAs will be isomorphic to each other. Right? So given some arbitrary DFA, you construct its MN relation that's induced by it. And then from that MN relation, you construct the DFA back. Then you will basically get an isomorphic DFA. Okay. So let's prove this now. Right? So let's call this as theorem 3. So this will also give us some practice on how to prove that two DFAs are isomorphic to each other. Okay, so let's define some notation, right? So let's say that this M was the Q sigma delta S and F, right? And based on that, right, we define this Mayer-Hildenburg relations. We say that X is related to Y if and only if delta hat of S comma X is equal to delta hat of S comma Y. And then based on this Mayer-Hildenburg relation, we can construct this new DFA, right? So this Q prime is going to be the set of equivalence classes of the original MN relation. And then we have sigma delta prime, equivalence class of epsilon, and F prime. Okay. So we want to show that, so we want to prove that this M and M are isomorphic. Okay, so I hope that the statement of the theorem is clear to everyone. Okay. Okay, so how should I proceed forward, right? So I need to, so in order to show that two DF is isomorphic, I need to define this function, right? F from one DFA to the, from the state space of one DFA to the state space of other DFA, such that this F should satisfy the properties, right? So it should be one-to-one and onto. It should relate the start states, the transitions, and the final states. Okay. So let's define this function F. Right? So we'll define this function F from the state space of this constructed DFA, right, to the original DFA, to the state space of the original DFA. So let's consider a particular state in this constructed DFA, which we know is going to be an equivalence class of this MN relation. So let's consider the equivalence class of some X. So what should I relate this equivalence class to? Right? So I should relate this to some state of the original DFA. So that's what we are doing, right? So we are relating states of the new DFA to the states of the original DFA. Okay. So the states of this new DFA are equivalence classes of the MN relation. So let's say I consider the equivalence class of some string X. Okay, so Vikram is saying it is delta hat of S comma X. Right? So let's write this down. So delta hat of S comma X. Okay, so this is going to be a state in the original DFA. Right? And using this delta hat, right? So it's the transition function of the original DFA. Right. So this is how we have defined F. So F is clearly a function, right? But now we need to show the four properties, right? So the first thing that we need to show is that it is one-to-one and on. So how do we show that a function is one-to-one? So it should basically relate, so it should basically relate different elements, right, of the domain to different elements of the codomain. So let's say that, so let's say that it relates two different, or rather, it relates two elements of the domain to the same element of the codomain. So let's say that f of x is equal to f of y. So then you have to show that in this case, these two must be the same. Right? So what can we say about f of x being equal to f of y? So that would mean that delta hat of s comma x is equal to delta hat of s comma y, because that's how we would define f. However, right, so this is exactly the definition of this relation, right, uh, of the Mn relation that is induced by the automaton, right? So this would mean that x is related to y, which in turn would mean that their equivalence classes are the same. So here there is only one equivalence relation, right, which is this relation that is induced uh, by the automaton, and that's why so that's why the equivalence classes will be the same. Okay, so this means that the function is one to one, and we also need to show that it is onto, which means that for every element of the codomain, there must exist some element of the domain such that f of that element is the element in the codomain. So, okay, so an element of the codomain is some state q, which belongs to q. So how do we know that there exists some element of the domain uh, which actually relates, which is actually related to q by f? So we need to show that there exists some x which belongs to q prime, such that f of x is equal to q. So why is this true? Okay, so Vikram is asking that are we starting out with an M that has no inaccessible states? So that is correct, right? So in fact, that's the assumption that we are making, that every particular so the assumption that we're making is that every state in the original DFA is accessible, which means that there exists a string, right? So there exists an X such that delta hat of S comma X is equal to Q. Right? And that's why this particular relation also holds. So f of this equivalence, so f of the equivalence class of this string X will actually be equal to Q, and that's why this function is onto, because for every state q, there exists a string which takes you to that state from the start state. Uh, and the equivalence class of that string is exactly going to be mapped to the state q itself. Okay, so that's why this function is onto as well. Okay. So now that we have proved that this function f is one-to-one and onto, so that means that the number of states are the same in both this. So in both the DFAs, the number of states are the same. So next we have to show that the start states are related to each other. So we have to prove that f of epsilon, which is the start state of the constructed DFA, is the same as the start state of the original DFA. So this is very straightforward, right? Because f of epsilon. So if you apply the definition of f, so this is the same as delta hat of s comma epsilon, which is the same as s. So the next thing that we have to show is that this f also relates the transitions, right? So which means that if you take a transition in the original in the constructed DFA, it should be related through f, right, to a transition in the original DFA. So in particular, right, we need to show that, sorry, let me write down what we need to prove. So we need to prove that f of, if you take a transition in the constructed DFA, right, which is this delta prime of some x in A, then this is the same as taking a transition in the original DFA, right? So which is this delta of f of x, comma. So again, right, we can directly apply the definition of f to show this, right? So f of delta prime of this x, comma a. So what is this? So we have defined this as uh, this delta hat of sorry. Right, so let's look at how we have defined this f of a particular equivalence class. Right, so f of a particular equivalence class is defined as delta hat of s comma x. So this is the okay. Uh, so delta prime of x a, right? So let's first actually apply the transition function here. Right? So f of delta prime of x a, right? So this is the same as f of x a, which in turn is the same as delta hat of s comma xa. And this we know, right, by the definition of delta hat is the same as delta hat of s comma x comma a. And this in turn is the same as delta of f of x, because that's what f of x is defined to be. So in the first step, right, we basically applied the definition of delta prime. So delta prime of x comma a was, we defined this to be the string, right, the equivalence class of the string xa. And then in the next step, right, I apply the function, the definition of f, so that f of this xa is the same as delta hat of s comma xa. And then I just apply the definition of the extended transition function. So this means that the transitions in this constructed DFA, right, basically mimic the transitions of the original DFA. And the last thing that we need to show is that the final states are also related with to each other, right? So if some x, right, belongs to f prime, so this is what we have to show. If and only if f of this x uh, belongs to f. So how do we show this? So let's say that x belongs to f prime. So we have seen that this would mean that x, right, should belong to R, which in turn means that this delta hat of s comma x should belong to f. But this is the same as, so delta hat of s comma x is the same as f of x belongs to f. So this completes the proof that that indeed, right, if you start with yeah, so this is the statement of the theorem, right? So this completes the proof that if you start with some DFA then you obtain the Mn relation that is induced by that DFA, and then you construct another DFA based on that induced Mn relation. Then you basically get back the original DFA, right? So you get the isomorphic. So you get a DFA which is isomorphic to the original DFA. Okay. So are there any questions so far? Okay. Okay, so in that case, right, let me. Okay. So in that case, right, so let's continue forward. Okay. So what have we seen so far? So we have seen that okay, if you start with a regular language, then you can define this new relation, right, this MN relation, right, which has certain properties, and this MN relation is in some ways an identical sort of uh, this MN relation is an identical structure to a DFA. So instead of reasoning about DFAs, we can now reason about this MN relations, right? Because from an MN relation, I can get a DFA, and from a DFA, I can get an MN relation. So it makes sense to just reason about MN relations now. Okay, so that's exactly what we're going to do. Right? So what we will show, in fact, is that if you're given a language, right, then there exists what's called a coarsest MN relation, right, which is the relation with the least number of equivalence classes, right, the fewest number of equivalence classes, right. Given any other, so given a language, right, if you consider the class of all MN relations uh, that are induced by that particular language, then there exists this MN relation with the smallest number of equivalence classes. And in fact, that is exactly the MN relation that you obtain after the collapsing algorithm. So that's what we will show. Okay. So before doing that, right? So we need to define this notion of coarsest and coarsest relation. Right? So this also uh, relates to this notion of refinement, right, that we defined, or that was one of the properties of the MN relation. So when do we say? So let's say that you're given some arbitrary set U, and if you're given two relations, so let's call this as relation one and relation two. So we say that relation one refines relation two, uh, if and only if this relation one, right? So these are both relations, right? So which means they are subset of U cross U. So we say that relation one defines relation two, if and only if this relation one is a subset of relation two. So which means that it actually relates. So if two elements are related by this relation one, then they are also related by this relation two. So if X is related to Y for some X and Y belonging to U, then that implies that X and Y are also related by the second refinement relation. Okay. So let's consider a simple example in order to understand this notion of refinement. Okay. So let's say that you have U consisting of three elements, right? Say A, B, and C. Now I define this relation one, right? So I want these two relations to be equivalence relations. So I define this relation one as consisting of the pairs AA, BB, and CC, and the pair AB and BA, right? While this relation two, right, I define as the same, right? So it consists of one of these elements, and in addition, it also consists of the elements BC, CB, and uh, AC and CA. So in this case, right, this relation two refines this relation one rather refines relation two, right? So relation one is a subset of relation two, okay? And moreover, right, so if you consider the equivalence classes of this relation one, right, so both of these are equivalence relations. So they are reflexive, they are symmetric, and they're transitive, right? But so what are the equivalence classes of relation one? Yeah. So this relation one has two equivalence classes, right? So there's an equivalence class which consists of just A, B, and then there is an equivalence class which consists of C. And what about relation two? So what are the equivalence classes of relation two? Yeah, so it just has one equivalence class, which consists of all the three elements in U. Okay. So these are the set of equivalence classes of the two relations. And as you can see, right, that if relation one defines relation two, then relation one has more equivalence classes than relation two. Right? So this is in general too as well. Right? So this is because so if you say that relation one defines relation two, right? Then that would mean that if you consider the equivalence class of X with respect to relation 1, okay, and the equivalence class of X with respect to relation 2, what is going to be the relation, or what's going to be the property between these two sets? So remember that when we say that relation 1 defines relation 2, it means that relation 1 is a subset of relation 2. So whenever X and Y are related by relation 1, then they are also related by relation 2. But relation 2 may have more more pairs, right? May have more tuples. So uh, X may be related to more elements according to relation 2. So the question that I'm asking is, how do I relate the equivalence classes of this particular element X with respect to relation 1 and relation 2? Yeah, so Alan is saying subset. So that is correct. Right? So every element that is related by relation 1 to X is also going to be related by relation 2 to X. So which means that every element that is present in the equivalence class of X according to relation 1 is also going to be present in the equivalence class of X according to relation 2. In addition, right, equivalence class of X in relation 2 may have more elements because it's a subset. So that's why, right, the number of equivalence classes in relation 1 is going to be less than or equal to the number of equivalence classes, or rather, it's going to be greater than or equal to the number of equivalence classes of relation 2. Okay. Uh, so as you so if relation 1 defines relation 2, then this also implies that the index of relation 1 is greater than or equal to the index of relation 2. So index is the number of equivalence classes uh, of the relation. Right? So notice that this notion of refinement is independent of equivalence relations. Right? So here we are just assuming that both of these are equivalence relations, but the notion of refinement in general is true, right, for any particular definition of relation. Okay. So in fact, right, so we also saw this one of the properties of an MN relation, right, is that it refines R. Okay. So let's also formally state that. Right? So if this is an MN relation, so let's also define let's define a relation based on R, right, which simply says that two elements are related if and only if they are present in R. Okay. So let's call this as this prime relation. So we say that X is related to Y if and only if so this is the definition. So if and only if X belongs to R, if and only if Y belongs to R. Okay. So in other words, right, if you take any two strings X and Y, right, if both of them are in R or both of them are not in R, then they will be related to each other. Otherwise, otherwise they won't be related to each other. Right? So you can also see that this is an equivalence relation. In fact, we said that any MN relation defines this particular relation. So any FN relation would define this prime relation. Okay. And if you consider the equivalence classes, right? So this one defines this relation. And if you consider the equivalence classes of the prime relation, right? So let's consider the set of all strings which are present in sigma star. Okay? Then the equivalence classes of this prime relation, right, is essentially going to. So there are only two equivalence classes, right? So there are so this R, and then there is sigma star minus R. So all of the elements that are present in R are related to each other. All of the elements that are present in sigma star minus R are also related to each other by the prime relation. Okay. and that's all, right? So these are the equivalence classes, and since this MN relation, right, refines this relation, right, it means that it's basically going to break the equivalence classes of this prime relation into further equivalence classes, right? So it's going to have more equivalence classes. Right? And in fact, right, so the equivalence classes of this MN relation that are present in R, right, uh, are based, so they will basically correspond to the final states of the DFA. Right? While the equivalence classes of this MN relation that are not in R would basically correspond to the non-final states of the DFA. So, so I hope that this also clears the definition of refinement, right? And how it relates to the property of the MN relation. Okay. Okay. So, are there any questions so far? Okay. So we introduced this notion of refinement, right? Because we said that we want to consider the coarsest relation, right? So just like we say that this relation one refines relation two, that also means that this relation two is coarser than relation one. So it has lesser number of equivalence classes than relation one. Okay, so ultimately we want to find out the coarsest MN relation that can be induced by a given language. So that would have the least number of equivalence classes, and therefore that would correspond to the smallest DFA that accepts a particular language. So okay, so this lecture has been a bit heavy, so let's actually stop the lecture today, and yeah, we'll continue tomorrow. Thank you, everyone.